Jax's revenge domain.
Brilliant work on this turnaround plan. Your vision saved us. I watched the lead investor clasp Gavin's shoulder like they were celebrating the deal of the century. The handshake lasted way too long. The smile was way too wide. Gavin leaned back in his chair with this relaxed confidence that made my watch band feel tight against my wrist. My name is Howard Brenner, and I'm 49 years old. That was the day I stopped letting other people take credit for my work. 14 people in that boardroom, every single one of them looking at Gavin like he just pulled Apex Financial back from bankruptcy. And maybe he had if you asked him, if you asked anyone in that moment, but I knew better. 4 months. That's how long I'd spent rebuilding their investment strategy from the ground up. 4 months of 18-hour days, while Gavin left every Thursday at 3 for his standing golf game with the partners. 4 months of running stress tests until my eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets, analyzing market volatility patterns that were bleeding our capital faster than anyone wanted to admit. The risk assessment models were mine, every single calculation showing which assets to liquidate and which ones to double down on. The compliance frameworks that would keep us clear of SEC violations, all mine. I'd even color-coded the presentation slides so the board could follow along without getting lost in the technical stuff. Gavin had contributed exactly 2 things to this project: his family name on the investor contact list and his ability to show up on time. Thank you, Harold. I really appreciate that, Gavin said to the investor. His voice had this humble quality to it, like he was trying not to brag but couldn't help feeling proud about saving the company. I waited 5 seconds. 10, 15. He didn't say my name, didn't even glance in my direction. Harold Mackenzie moved on to the next board member, still going on about Gavin's innovative thinking. Someone else chimed in about his strategic vision. Another person mentioned how impressive it was that he'd identified problems their entire leadership team had missed. Gavin just nodded along, taking it all in, soaking up praise for work he couldn't have done if someone handed him a manual and read it to him step by step. I sat there adjusting my watch band, tightening it until the metal pressed hard against my wrist. That helped me focus. The whole room felt wrong, like machinery that wasn't calibrated right. You know what gets me? This wasn't the first time. Over the past 2 years, I'd watched Gavin take my ideas in team meetings and rephrase them like they'd just occurred to him. His name always appeared first on project reports I'd written 90% of. Gavin got invited to client dinners while I stayed late finishing work that had both our names on it. I kept telling myself it didn't matter. That good work speaks for itself, that eventually people would notice who was actually producing results, but they hadn't noticed. They just kept praising Gavin. The meeting started wrapping up. People gathered their things, making small talk about quarterly projections and upcoming board retreats. Gavin stood up, buttoning his jacket, chatting with one of the board members about his weekend plans in the Hamptons. I reached down and unclipped my company ID badge from my belt. The plastic was warm from being against my body for the last 3 hours. I placed it right on the conference table, between Harold's coffee cup and the quarterly report someone had printed earlier. Then I stood up. I'm done here. Effective immediately. The room didn't go dead quiet. That's not how these things work in real life. But conversations slowed down. Harold looked over at me with this confused expression like I'd started speaking Chinese or something. Preston Walsh, our CEO, took a step toward me. What are you talking about, Howard? I'm resigning right now. You'll have something in writing by end of day, but consider this my official notice. Gavin finally looked at me, really looked, and I saw it right there in his expression, this flicker of panic he tried to cover up real quick. Let's talk about this outside, Preston said, already moving toward the door. There's nothing to talk about. I walked out, just turned around and left while they all stood there trying to figure out what had just happened. I didn't storm out or slam any doors, just walked at a normal pace through the building, got in my car, and drove home. Preston started calling within 30 minutes. I let the first few go to voicemail, but by the 20th attempt, I picked up just to make it stop. You're overreacting, he said. No hello, no asking if I was okay. Just straight into telling me I was wrong. Gavin was just accepting praise for the team. That's what project leaders do. Project leaders, I repeated. Since when is Gavin a project leader? You know what I mean? He was representing the work you both did. Both did. I loosened my watch band a notch. Preston, tell me one thing Gavin actually did on that project besides spell check the executive summary. Silence on his end for so long I thought the call dropped. It's more complicated than that, he finally said. Gavin has relationships with those investors. They trust him. That matters in situations like this. So I do all the work and he gets all the credit because people like his personality better. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? More silence then. Sleep on it. Don't make any rash decisions. We can figure this out tomorrow. I hung up. Here's what nobody tells you about quitting like that. The rest of your day feels really weird. I went home and sat in my garage for about an hour, not working on anything, just sitting there thinking about every other time something like this had happened. Smaller versions of the same thing. Gavin rephrasing my ideas in meetings like they just popped into his head. His name showing up first on reports I'd basically written myself. That night, I updated my professional profiles. Not with some angry rant about what happened. Nothing like that. Just quietly updated my experience, my skills, the specific turnaround projects I'd led, made sure every strategy I developed was listed under my name with details about the actual outcomes. The next morning, I woke up to 4 messages from people I'd never met. Investment managers at different firms. They'd seen my profile updates. They'd heard about the distressed asset model I'd built, and they wanted to know if I was available to consult on their struggling portfolios. At first, I thought maybe Preston had sent them my way as some kind of peace offering. But when I talked to the first one, he mentioned he'd been trying to track me down for months after hearing about my work through industry contacts. "We've got a similar situation," he told me. "Portfolio company that expanded too fast, burning cash in the wrong sectors. I heard you're the guy who knows how to fix this kind of mess. Where'd you hear that? People talk. Your methodology's been making the rounds in our circles. Everyone wants to know who built it. Not Gavin's name, mine." By the end of that first week, I had 9 different investment groups asking me to consult on their failing portfolios. They didn't want someone to just patch problems. They wanted someone who could look at a broken expansion strategy and rebuild it from scratch. That was my specialty. The thing I'd gotten really good at over 20 years of fixing other people's mistakes. I started saying yes. 1 project at a time at first, then 2 at once, then 6. The work was intense but different than before. Instead of spending months on a single project while someone else got celebrated for it, I was spending weeks on each one, getting paid what I should have been making in a year, and getting thanked by the actual decision makers who knew exactly who'd done the work. Preston kept trying to reach me, less often as the days went on, but still sending messages asking if I'd reconsider, saying things weren't the same without me. I didn't respond. Gavin tried exactly once, a single text message that said, "Hope there's no hard feelings, you're really talented, and I'm sure you'll do great things." I blocked his number. 8 weeks after I walked out of that investor meeting, my whole situation had changed. I was working with 12 different investment portfolios, making double what I used to earn, getting recognized by name when I walked into meetings. People actually listened when I talked. Nobody interrupted me to rephrase what I just said. Nobody else's name appeared on my work. Then Preston's name showed up on my phone again. Different time of day this time, late evening on a Friday. "We need help." His voice sounded strained, tired. "The portfolio's bleeding worse than before. The board wants you back. Name your price." I let that hang in the air for a moment. Imagined him in his office, probably pacing around. "What happened to your brilliant strategist?" The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. He couldn't replicate the results. "Replicate?" I said. "That's an interesting word choice, Preston Howard. Listen, I know how this looks. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Gavin took credit for work he couldn't actually do, and now you're in trouble because you believed him." The investors are asking questions. They want to know why the implementation isn't working. They're asking specifically for you. Of course they were, because investors aren't stupid. They can tell the difference between someone who understands strategy and someone who's just presenting it. "That's because he didn't create it," I said. "That's why he couldn't replicate the results. You can't replicate something you never understood in the first place." Preston made this sound half sigh, half groan. "Please, we're losing everything. The board is talking about cleaning house. Your model was supposed to save us, but without you here to implement it, we're worse off than when we started. My model is fine. Your execution is the problem. Then come back and execute it. Whatever you want, whatever it takes." I adjusted my watch band, felt the familiar pressure. "I'll consult. But I'm not coming back as an employee. I work for myself now." "Fine. Whatever. Name your terms. Triple my old salary. That's the consulting rate, not annual. You're paying me what I'm worth now, not what you decided I was worth before." I heard him breathe out hard. "Done. Anything else?" I present directly to the board and investors. No intermediaries, no managers, no one else's name on my work. Just mine. "Of course. Absolutely." And Gavin sits in that room while I do it. Silence. "Preston, you still there? I heard you. I just don't understand why that's necessary." Because I want him to watch while I explain every single thing he claimed as his own. Every decision point he took credit for, every calculation he couldn't reproduce. I want him to sit there while the same people who praised him realize exactly what happened. That's the condition. Take it or I hang up and you can figure this out yourself. More silence, then. I'll make it happen. We set the meeting for 2 weeks out. That gave me time to finish my current projects and prepare for what was coming. Those 2 weeks felt longer than the previous 8 combined. I kept working with my other clients, kept building my reputation, but part of my brain was already planning what I'd say in that room, how I'd walk them through the strategy in a way that made it crystal clear who'd built it. I wasn't nervous exactly, more like focused. The way you feel before something important that you know you can handle. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep, not from anxiety, from anticipation. I lay there thinking about Gavin's face when Harold had praised him, that relaxed confidence, that easy acceptance of recognition he hadn't earned. Tomorrow that was going to change. I showed up 15 minutes early. The building looked exactly the same, but walking into it felt completely different. Last time I'd been an employee hoping someone would notice my work. This time I was a hired expert they were paying premium rates to fix their disaster. Preston met me in the lobby. He looked worse than he'd sounded on the phone, dark circles under his eyes. Shirt not as crisp as usual. His whole demeanor screamed stress. "Thank you for coming," he said. "The board's already gathering upstairs. They're really eager to hear from you. Is Gavin here?" "He's here." I told him he needed to attend as part of the transition team. Preston paused. He wasn't thrilled about it. We walked through the building toward the same room where everything had gone down 8 weeks ago. My footsteps echoed in the hallway. I wasn't wearing the same clothes as last time. I'd chosen something sharper, more expensive, the kind of outfit that said I wasn't asking for permission anymore. The room was packed when we entered. 14 people again, but different faces this time. The full board, the investors who'd been asking hard questions. Senior leadership I recognized from my time working there. And Gavin sitting near the back looking like he wanted to crawl under the table. Our eyes met for maybe half a second. He looked away first. "Everyone, this is Howard Brenner," Preston announced. "He'll be walking us through the investment strategy and its implementation." Harold Mackenzie stood up and shook my hand. Same guy who'd praised Gavin 8 weeks ago. "We've heard a lot about you. People in the industry speak very highly of your work. I appreciate that." I moved to the front of the room, connected my laptop to the projector, and pulled up my presentation. 4 months of work distilled into a format that would take about 2 hours to properly explain. I didn't rush anything, didn't try to summarize. I walked them through every single piece of it. Started with the initial assessment, how I'd identified which sectors were draining capital without generating returns. Showed them the analysis I'd run on their expansion timeline, the specific points where decisions had been made without adequate data. Explained exactly how I'd rebuilt their model from the ground up. This section here, I said, pointing to a particularly complex projection, required understanding international banking regulations in 6 different countries. I spent 3 weeks just researching compliance requirements because one mistake here would have meant regulatory exposure worth tens of millions. One of the board members leaned forward. "Gavin, did you work on this part?" I didn't look at Gavin, kept my focus on the board member. I worked on this section alone. It required specific knowledge of international finance law that takes years to develop. Gavin stayed quiet. I moved to the next part, the risk mitigation strategies, the sector-by-sector breakdown of where to pull back and where to invest more heavily. The timeline for implementation that would minimize disruption while maximizing recovery. The key insight here, I explained, was recognizing that the problem wasn't the expansion itself. It was the pace and targeting. You'd moved into sectors that required 5 to 7 years of relationship building before profitability, but you were expecting returns in 24 months. That mismatch was killing your cash flow. Harold was taking notes now, really engaged with the details. How did you identify which sectors had the longer timeline? Historical analysis of similar expansions cross-referenced with regulatory reports and competitor performance data. About 60 hours of research, but once the pattern became clear, the recommendations followed naturally. Another board member spoke up, and the implementation plan. "How confident are you this will actually work? The model's solid, the issue you've been having is execution. This strategy requires someone who understands not just what to do, but why each step matters and how they all connect. You can't just follow it like a recipe." "Which is why it wasn't working," Harold said slowly. You could see the realization dawning on his face. "We thought we could just follow the plan, but without understanding the reasoning behind it. It falls apart the moment you hit an unexpected variable." I finished, "Which you did, multiple times over the past 8 weeks. I glanced at Gavin then, just briefly. He was staring at his hands, jaw clenched tight. The presentation continued. Hour 2. I answered every question they threw at me, clarified every confusion, walked them through scenarios and contingencies and alternative approaches if certain assumptions proved wrong. By the end, the energy in the room had completely shifted. The investors who'd been ready to pull out were talking about moving forward. Board members were asking about implementation timelines. Everyone was focused, engaged, understanding exactly what needed to happen next. This is exceptional work, Harold said. I have to ask, when we were here 8 weeks ago, we were told this was Gavin's strategy. Can you help us understand how the collaboration worked? The room got very still. I looked directly at Gavin, made sure everyone saw me looking at him. Then I turned back to Harold. There was no collaboration. I built this strategy alone over 4 months. Gavin's contribution was attending the presentation where I explained it to you. You could feel the shift in the room. Not dramatic. No one gasped or anything like that. But people sat back in their seats differently, exchanged glances, started reassessing everything they thought they knew. Harold looked over at Gavin with a completely different expression than he'd had 8 weeks ago. Is that accurate? Gavin opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I mean, we worked as a team on the broader project. That's not what I asked, one of the board members said firmly. Did you develop this strategy? I was involved in the overall project management. Answer the question, Harold said. His tone wasn't angry, just matter of fact, like he was recalculating everything he'd thought he knew about the situation. The silence stretched out. Gavin's face had gone red, not from anger, from embarrassment, from being cornered in front of people whose respect he'd been borrowing without earning it. No, he finally said, barely audible. I didn't develop the strategy. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Harold turned back to me. What do you need from us to fix this situation? I spent the next 12 weeks working with them on implementation. Not as an employee, as an independent expert they were paying $300 an hour to access. The turnaround started showing results within 6 weeks. Sectors they'd exited stopped draining capital. Sectors they doubled down on started generating the returns I'd projected. The investors stopped talking about pulling out and started discussing additional investments. Gavin got transferred to a different division within the first month. Internal operations, they called it. Something with clear deliverables and no collaborative projects. I heard through people still working there that he'd requested a transfer to their West Coast office within 3 months. Couldn't handle being in the same building where everyone now knew he'd once taken credit for work he couldn't reproduce. I didn't feel bad about that. My consulting practice kept growing during those 12 weeks. The 9 portfolios became 15, then 22. Investment groups started reaching out before their companies hit crisis mode. They wanted preventive assessments. Someone to look at their expansion plans before they committed millions to strategies that wouldn't work. I realized I didn't have to say yes to everything anymore. I could choose work that interested me, work with people who respected expertise, work where my name stayed attached to what I built. 6 months after that confrontation presentation, I was keynoting at the Regional Investment Management Conference. About 200 people in the audience. Questions afterward that showed people had really understood the material, really grasped the methodology behind successful turnarounds. As I was leaving the stage, someone stopped me. Older guy, looked like an investor type. That presentation you gave 6 months ago, he said. The one where you set the record straight about who actually built that strategy. I was in the room. I remembered him one of the board members who'd asked Gavin directly if he'd developed the approach. I wanted to tell you something, he continued. After that meeting, our board implemented new policies about project attribution. We require detailed contribution logs on major projects now. We verify claims during presentations. What you did changed how we operate. That's good, I said. Really good. It wasn't comfortable at the time watching someone get exposed like that, but it needed to happen. So thank you. He walked away before I could respond. I stood there in the empty auditorium thinking about that moment when I'd placed my ID badge on the table and walked out. How it had felt like I was destroying something I'd built. But what came next was better. More honest, more sustainable, more mine. 3 years later, my consulting practice was established enough that I could afford to be really selective. I took on projects that challenged me, turned down work that felt repetitive, started mentoring younger professionals who were dealing with similar credit theft situations, helping them document their work properly and advocate for themselves. Some of them asked if they should quit, like I did. Only if you're ready to build something yourself. I told them, don't quit to make a point. Quit because you know you can do better somewhere else. Not everyone was ready for that. Some stayed and fought within their companies. Some moved to different organizations. Some started their own practices like I had, but they all learned the same lesson I'd learned. Your work has to be undeniably yours. Document everything. Make sure people know who built what. Don't wait for someone to notice. Make it visible. Gavin's name stopped coming up in industry conversations. He'd become one of those people who'd had a moment of visibility and then faded back into the background. Working somewhere, doing something, but not making waves, not getting recognition. And me, I built exactly what I'd wanted. A practice where I got paid what I was worth. Where my name stayed attached to my thinking. Where I could choose who I worked with and what problems I solved. The revenge wasn't destroying Gavin's career. That was just a consequence of his own choices catching up with him. The real revenge was building something so successful that walking away from that moment looked like the best decision I'd ever made. Here's what I learned after 20+ years in corporate America. Competence always wins in the end. Not immediately, not without a fight sometimes, but eventually the truth comes out. The people who actually know how to build things, who understand the work from the ground up, who can explain not just what to do, but why it works, those people get recognized. The politicians and the credit thieves, they might fool people for a while, but when it comes time to deliver results, when the real pressure is on, their limitations become obvious. You can't fake expertise when millions of dollars are on the line. Sometimes you have to be willing to walk away to prove your worth. Sometimes you have to be willing to start over. It's not easy, especially when you've got a mortgage and responsibilities. But there's something powerful about knowing you can build success on your own terms. Looking back, that moment in the boardroom wasn't just about getting credit for one project. It was about respect, about being seen for who you really are instead of being invisible while someone else gets praised for your thinking. Every man deserves that recognition. Every professional who's put in the work, who's developed real expertise over years of experience, deserves to have their contributions acknowledged. Don't let anyone convince you that office politics matter more than competence. Don't let anyone tell you that relationships trump results. Stand up for your work. Document your contributions. And if they still don't see your value, build something where they will. The market rewards real expertise. Always has. Always will. You've got more power than you think. Sometimes you just have to be willing to use it. Thanks for listening to my story. If this resonates with you, if it reminds you of something in your own career, drop a comment and let me know. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Your experience matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.